Hi everyone, Lisa Haven here, and I've got a huge report to share with you today, and that is this. The United Nations has been on a wire, if you will, pulling more strings than ever before. I know recently that they basically turned on Donald Trump. I did a report yesterday where they turned on him because of his decision to make Jerusalem the capital of Israel and move the U.S. Embassy into Jerusalem, and basically lost out on a vote, and I want to quote this right, but it was 128 to 9, 128 voting against and 9 voting for there, and a lot of nations sideswept. But not only that, I also did a report on the UN, and we've talked about their 17 goals, identification 2020 right here if you guys haven't seen that. This expands on goal 16.9, which promises to have everybody in the world have their own personal identification by 2030. This is the group that's pushing that to get that done. And also what I am doing today is bringing on Dave Hodges. He's got a lot of inside information, but to talk about what's going on in Chicago. This is another thing the United Nations is pushing their hands. It's just kind of coming at us from every corner. But as you know, I did a report also a few days ago in which I exposed how the United Nations is wanting to implement some martial law style, if you will, not direct martial law, but that's ultimately the agenda, but how they are wanting to send peacekeepers into the United Nations using their disarmament and recruitment group, which is already created via the Strong Cities Network. And I've touched on that, but the Strong Cities Network is basically a global police force initiative. And then I revealed how the Cook County Commissioner there in Chicago, Richard Boykin, traveled to New York to discuss the Chicago's violence program and basically said in a meeting with the United Nations Assistant Secretary General for Peace Building Support that he wanted to bring the UN peacekeepers instead of the National Guard into the city and streets of Chicago in order to bring back more or less violence. Now that's outright breaking our laws, obviously. Now there's no, well, let me bring on Dave Hodges because he's got a little bit more different slant and inside information on what's going on in Chicago. So Dave, are you with me over there?
I am, Lisa. Good to be with you.
Good. Sorry, I was trying to fit a lot in a little bit of time because I know we're like at this time crunch. But I wanted to bring you on because there are so many things that I've reported about the United Nations this week alone. Tell me what's going on in Chicago.
Well, first of all, Boykin's trip to the United Nations was window dressing. And what I mean by that, it was basically a false flag operation because the UN is already in Chicago. We're seeing now, getting multiple reports. They're seeing UN helicopters, they're seeing UN vehicles, and also I have inside information from a very trusted FBI source that the infamous black sites that were revealed in the independent media 2 years ago are now being manned by UN personnel with the assistance of DHS and the Chicago Police Department. And the black sites are places where people go to have their rights taken away. They're arrested and the police don't like them for one reason or another, and they take them to this site. They're not given lawyers. They're handcuffed to radiator bars or to chairs, and they can be held for days or weeks at a time. And then they have no recourse to sue because there's no record that they were ever there. So what we're looking at now is the UN is involved in this, and this really makes me concerned because this means the UN plans on FEMA camp type activities. So Boykin, just to recap the opening part of this, he went to New York, but it was already a done deal that the UN was going to be there, and they already are there. And their main mission is going to be gun confiscation and the removal of dissidents. Now, I wrote about this past week, in which I clearly stated that FM 39.4 comes into play. This is an Army field manual that has to do with FEMA camps. And in this FEMA camp set of regulations...
Are you talking about the internment and resettlement document? Is that one?
Exactly. And in there they say they're going to be using foreign operatives to run the camps. That's the UN, folks. And this is what we're seeing with the UN at the Chicago black sites working with DHS. They're preparing to intern millions of Americans in times of civil stress. They're not going to just go out and start pulling people out of their homes immediately. There's going to be a preemptive clause of some sort is what this is my operating hypothesis. And then they're going to go after the guns. And by the way, UN gun confiscation, their policy is if you resist, you die. And they're also going to go get political dissidents. A Chicago radio station was reporting on this last week, and they were commenting on my article, and they were pulled off the air, instantly blocked. So the censorship is in, and people need to ask themselves, why would the Cook County authorities need to bring in the UN? Donald Trump threatened to send in the National Guard to Chicago because it's a city that's out of control. That's what the National Guard's job is. Why would they bring in the UN? And by the way, to you people who are rolling your eyes and saying this isn't true, go look it up. It's in the Chicago Tribune. It's in their newspapers. The UN is there. There's no question, and there's no excuse for not using the National Guard if they think this is an emergency, not a foreign occupation military force. And we are successfully being occupied and invaded.
And let me say this, and it's not this kind of invasion where when people hear the word invasion, they think, oh, they're marching on the streets, they've got their guns, and this is exactly what's happening. It's on a lot minor scale, but let me just throw this out there. The United Nations already has its tentacles in each and every single, basically one of the 50 states in America. They all have their own UN department. If you Google Chicago and United Nations, they actually have jobs, and I'll throw this up on the screen because I did it the other day, but they are hiring for people to work for the UN in that particular area. These are all across the country. Not to mention in your schools, they have Model UN, I think is the name of it, where they're teaching your children these United Nations globalist principles. And it's not just peace on earth, goodwill to men we're talking here. It's New World Order. Forget the United States of America. Forget patriotism and nationalism. These are the kinds of things that that's being taught at the Model UN under the radar. So they're already here. There's a slow process and a slow implementation of all of it. And I showed this to Chicago Tribune report on my last couple videos ago. But so there are a lot of red flags and a lot of creepy things. Now, I didn't mention this before, but Dave Hodges is the author of the Common Sense Show there, and I'll leave a link below for him, but he's got a massive audience, speaks to millions of people a month. So he's got some inside information, which is exactly why I wanted to bring him on. So what do you say to all of that, Dave?
Well, it's not just Chicago. People going, oh, thank God, that's their problem. And that's a normal human reaction. But the mayor of St. Louis this last week is offering groceries in place of guns. In other words, bring your gun in, get a bag of groceries. St. Louis leads the country in homicides by gun. So they're next. Cleveland is going to follow. I mean, we're going to go right down the line here. They're going to go through the Rust Belt cities, first of all, and then it's going to be New York. It's crazy, Lisa, what's going on. We are being invaded as we speak. And let me tell one quick story. A friend of mine, John Moore, former ex-Green Beret, he's also a talk show host on Republic Broadcasting Network. He has a daughter that lives in Seattle, and she went and answered an ad to buy a puppy. So she goes to this nice upscale home, and she's looking at the dog, and then she asks the woman who's there, well, what do you do for a living? And she said, quote, I'm a UN peacekeeper. So your government under Obama purchased homes, acquired homes through HUD foreclosures and repossessions, and they're giving it to UN peacekeepers so they can live among us and be activated at a time of their choosing.
And a lot of this information you get from viewers that email you and inside information, right? From people that you know within the FBI.
Yeah, Lisa, let me address the inside information. There's some criticism that gets levied against us in the independent media for naming unknown sources. And my unnamed source brought me the Chicago story. Now it's all over. So obviously they were correct. They brought me the Bundy release 3 days in advance of the announce. Let me tell you why these people have to remain unnamed for those who would criticize the practice. I interviewed Cody Snodgrass last Sunday, and Cody is a former CIA black op, and he went into detail about various black operations that had taken place under the purview of the CIA, all the people they've killed, how the Clintons were a part of it. And Cody was involved in a serious car accident, intentional, almost killed him. That's why these people need to remain unnamed. And I said on the air, Cody, I'm concerned about your safety. I know how far you can go when you've crossed the line. And so, Lisa, people who would criticize the use of unnamed sources don't understand how dangerous this is for the people that bring out the information.
So true. So true. And that's the thing. It is. There are, when people, you and me do what we do online. There's certain guidelines that we have to do and watch out for, because there is a lot of, when you leak information, there is kind of that play. But I've known you long enough that you've got a pretty good grasp on things, and people will take a lot of it out of context and over expand what we're really saying here. And that's what we got to be careful about too. But definitely the United Nations is already here. There's already a form of takeover. Now, obviously, they're not going and taking over the U.S. government with their guns and shields. It's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about a slow boiling process in which right now it seems to be blowing up. At first, they put their little groups in each and every single one of our schools, and then they put their offices in our states. They have offices pretty much in all the 50 states. I did a whole report on this. And not only that, but you have the disarmament group. There's the United Nations. They have their own website. And the goal of that is to disarm the world. They really want to disarm all of us. What's the agenda there?
Well, there's two agendas at work here. And I'm so glad you brought it up in the context that you did. First of all, the Democide Project at the University of Hawaii did a study. And there were 19 gun confiscations, major gun confiscations in the 20th century, and every one of them was followed by genocide. And I wrote an article on that this past week. The end game is this. They want to make us defenseless so they can take us over and do away with the ones who are undesirable. And Lisa, I've got more proof to this too. Two and a half months ago, Paul Martin and I, and Paul's from revolutionradio.org, we received photographs of UN vehicles outside Rawlins, Wyoming, and they were bolted down on the ground and they had specialized towers. And I'm thinking, what the heck is this? So I took it to my military experts, and they said, those are UN vehicles, and that is a special device designed to survive an EMP attack and permit localized cell phone traffic on a selected frequency. And I said, uh-oh. And the guy who sent us the pictures surfaced. He came to Paul Martin's store and introduced himself and gave us even more information. This is legit. The UN is here. They're preparing to survive an EMP attack, and then they're going to roll out their gun confiscation policies. If you recall, in the first part of this interview, I said they're waiting for a precipitating incident to roll out their forces, and I'm telling you, it's going to be an EMP attack.
And I'm on the fence. I don't know if it'll be an EMP or whatever they'll do. I think that they definitely have something in the waiting, and my hope is that it gets sideswiped, whatever it is, that we can prevent it. But I know that, had we had Hillary in office, we'd probably be a lot worse than we are today. So I'm hopeful that it can get sideswiped, or whatever it may be.
Without question. You're absolutely right. Without question, it'd be worse with Hillary. But let me tell you why I'm so confident that the plan is for an EMP attack. I have published pictures on the website from 2.5 months ago and again this past week, where I published the pictures of the UN vehicles and these cell phone tower anti-EMP devices.
You can send those pictures to me? You have them on your website?
Yeah, they're on an article I wrote in this past week about the UN and the EMP attack.
Okay, I'll grab them.
Yeah, and I first reported on this about 10 weeks ago when Paul Martin and I were approached by the same individual who has an intelligence background. And obviously, we have to keep his name out of this because he'd be dead tomorrow if we let this out.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're wrong, just for sake of us here in America, And, that's why I always encourage everyone, be prepared no matter what. Things can get foiled. Things can get sideswiped. And I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know that I see preparations at the UN. I know that I see workings from inside. I know that they're pushing a lot of things, and I know we've pissed off a lot of people recently on the very far left who are in bed with Islam, and we have that whole marriage going, and Islam, United Nations, they're all part of it. A friend of my friend, or the enemy of the enemy is my friend. That saying is kind of what we're seeing. So I guess any last thoughts, and then also share your website information, any of that stuff, so people can follow up you on YouTube. You also got a YouTube account. So share all that now, if you will, Dave.
Yeah, final thought on the content. There's little question about the UN's intent with EMP, but I'll say this. There's a silver lining. I wrote an article on December 23rd on the website in which I talk about Trump is using what I dubbed a rope-a-dope strategy. And he is framing people for treason. And I don't mean framing illegally. He's exposing people for treason and for sexual improprieties, and they're all resigning. You should see the dozens of CEOs that have resigned since September, and I list them all in this article. And the last one was Eric Schmidt, the head of Alphabet, which is Google's parent company. And so, can Trump head this off? Well, he's certainly making the right moves by going after the people who are a part of this and that are connected with the UN with business partnerships. Now, as far as how people can follow my work, thecommonsenseshow.com is our website. We have a radio show that airs from 8 to 11 p.m. Sunday evenings. Easiest way to listen, if you don't have direct access to one of the 55 stations we're on, is to go to Listen Live button on the top right-hand corner of my website. And we do have a YouTube channel in which I do 10 to 12 news blurbs a day, and that news channel is called The Common Sense Show.
Awesome. And I'll leave all those links below. Check him out on YouTube. He's there. Also, please don't forget to check out my partner, virtualshield.com/Lisa Haven. Make sure you're at least scrambling your IP address. Gives the NSA a run for their money. And they throw away the logs there at Virtual Shield, so that's a good thing. Well, thanks again for tuning into my channel here. And don't forget to check out Dave Hodges also. Well, this is Lisa Haven and Dave Hodges signing out.